Let's bring on now the editor of Town and Country, Jay Feldon. The magazine's latest issue features the Inheritance Guide when family members get money for nothing. And it, John Leake writes in part, inheritances always come with a number of well-documented perils. In an article titled Why Most Families Lose Their Wealth by the Third Generation, financial planner Tim Voorhees argues that the biggest trouble with inherited money is that it often afflicts its beneficiaries with a profound lack of purpose. And Jay, you know what? Growing up, I always looked at these kids that lived in big houses and their parents drove big cars. And of course, growing up, you're like, gee, well, why didn't I draw that lottery ticket? The older I get, and I'm serious, the older I get, the more I go, thank God I drew my lottery ticket, which is I had to work my ass off for 25 years to
like
get
that, or you're going to give the impression that you don't have to work too hard.
Well, I've worked my 25 years, okay? So anyway, but, that's really unfair. But we see it time and time again with these people that have inherited great amounts of wealth. They have this lack of purpose, depression, and sort of just wander through life.
Well, look, I mean, when we decided to take this topic up, one thing we love to do at Town and Country is identify those areas in life that give the rich profound anxiety, if you can imagine such a thing, and inheriting money or passing it on is one of those things. And I think for, the 9 million millionaires in this country, this is a subject that they think a lot about. For those of us, I think most of us here at the table who don't have that problem, it's interesting to watch, and Americans are very interested in, what it is to create a dynasty and pass it on. And we love the Kennedys, we love the Rockefellers, etc. One of the great...
But Jay, the Rockefellers obviously had enough money to do this, and they figured something out. But again, most of these fortunes lost by the third generation because the second and third generation have a lack of purpose. They don't continue doing what made their family rich in the first place.
That's right. I think, the great thinker on this is Andrew Carnegie, who was, a Scot who moved to America, had a Presbyterian backbone, made it all himself, and was very reluctant to give it away when he died. He wrote a famous essay about wealth. It's basically been the blueprint for other big families to be philanthropists. And Buffett is kind of the modern day example of a Carnegie. He said, publicly that he's not really passing on much of his wealth. There's a funny example of his daughter who has said, he's been so principled about this that, I can't even get him to lend me money to redo my kitchen. Whereas you have other examples, obviously, in the world right now. For instance, a man named Bernie Ecclestone, who's the CEO of Formula One, a very wealthy man, bought his daughter the old Aaron Spelling mansion in Beverly Hills for about $85 million. She's 24, I believe. So, two examples of what to do and maybe what not to do. And we wanted to look at, this having a piece written by, as you said, John Leake, who himself admits having inherited a decent chunk of Pfizer stock, which enabled him to live a pretty soigné life in Rome right after he graduated from college with me. But it also set him up to be a kid who people thought, what's he ever going to do with his life? He's just living in Rome, eating risotto, drinking red wine, and he's made a good, he's made it good by becoming a writer and writing 2 books. But there are others who don't. There's many examples in here that we go through of, here you go, of people who have not done so well. And ended up, killing themselves when they're young, killing other people, killing their family, etc.
Mike Barnacle.
Well, I find it awfully difficult, Joe, to come up with any sympathy for lack of a better phrase, the thanks dad generation with the room temperature IQs who can't create U.S. steel because it's already been created. But there is an interesting element to this, I would think, in that over the past 10 or 15 years, the dot-com boom, and even currently, the descendants of Eric Schmidt, the Google generation, they are going to, obviously, his children are going to have millions of dollars. And what do you do with that money? What do you do to find that internal drive to try and replicate or do something?
Yes. Well, that's the thing that I think keeps us looking at new money all the time, right? And looking at Carnegie, who was himself was a version of this, right? The money used to come from smokestacks, now it comes from technology for the most part. And for us to think about what are those new generation wealthy people who don't have any experience in passing the money down, and for the most part don't want to ruin their kids' lives. But I think the smart ones realize that money will most likely ruin your kid's life. We wanted to have these famous examples of the past of families in America that have done it well, right? So, like I say, the Rockefellers, the Lauders, who recently Leonard Lauder collected over his lifetime a remarkable art collection. And when I say remarkable, I mean historically valuable, something that he spent years putting together, and he's given to the Met, and it's worth something more than $1 billion. That's something that is worth giving back, and he did good, right? That's a good example.
And Jay, ironically, Mick Jagger, of course, you talk about how Mick Jagger is an example of somebody who's following the Warren Buffett approach, which is don't pass a lot on.
I thought this was pretty charming, right? I mean, you might not expect that of him. You might not think he has any real thoughts about what to do with his kids. He has a number of children, right? Yeah. I think there was a recent thing in the news about his former wife kind of asking him to set up one of his daughters with a house in London, and he apparently didn't want to do that. And having been somebody who grew up himself, having to make his own way, he thinks that's important and that it's worth passing down.
That's an interesting aspect to it, in that some of it obviously is financial wizardry, knowing what to do with the money that you pass down. But maybe a larger element would be just good parenting.
Yes, and I think that's what Buffett and Kay Graham both go to at the end of the day. Whatever you're going to pass down, whatever decision you're going to make about that trust, when they get it, how much it is, what kind of trust it is, the most important thing, obviously, is the values that you're passing along with it. And I think, for the older families, they seem to be ones who want to pass on the money in order to provide support for the next generation to oversee the foundations, to carry on the family vision. So that would be the Rockefeller model, right? Giving it away, public interest, being a part of society, etc. The newer money, I think, is still deciding what they want to do. Do they want to give it all away? A Jack Kent Cooke, for instance, who died in the 90s, was a kind of Carnegie-like figure. You probably knew him. He was a man, right, in your neck of the woods. He said he had a famous quote, which was, "Destiny demands you do better than your supposed best." We have an example of his daughter, who recently I don't know how recent, but got arrested for drunk driving, mooning the police and flipping them the bird. I don't know if that was her best or supposed best, but
Jack Kent Cooke,
worth noting.
Jack Kent Cooke owned the Washington Redskins with Edward Bennett Williams, and they always fought. And at one point, a waiter at the old Duke's Ebits restaurant told Edward Bennett Williams, "You got to forgive Jack. He's his own worst enemy." And Edward Bennett Williams looked at the waiter and said, "Not when I'm alive." Jay, you always look like $1 million, and you can give your suits to your children. We're going to be looking for the new issue of Town and Country. Jay Field, and thanks very much. Up next.